Hey folks, Dave Brown here with the New Populist. Thank you for joining me once again. Now, Venezuela is in the news, and they have been in the news now for the last several weeks because it seems we are on the precipice of some sort of direct conflict with that country. Of course, our goal is to overthrow Nicolas Maduro, who in 2025 is the worst man on planet Earth, right up there with Vladimir Putin. So, of course, the question is why now and why are we doing this? And that is the question I want to tackle in this video. Some of the reasons seem pretty obvious, but some of them aren't quite as obvious. And I will cover all that and then tell you what I personally think. Now, the obvious reasons. Trump himself has said it, and he has this problem of just saying what we all know, but what you're not supposed to say when you are president of the United States. And he said, we want to go grab the oil. Just like in Syria, just like in Iraq, he says, hey, let's go grab the oil. And that certainly is one of the reasons they have the largest proven reserves on planet Earth, with the caveat that a lot of their oil is heavy crude and is hard to access. And how is heavy crude different than light crude like they have in Saudi Arabia? Well, during the process of fractional distillation, we get less gas, less jet fuel, and more things like fuel oil for our cargo ships and asphalt materials, industrial lubricants, things that are not quite as expensive or doesn't get you quite as much money per barrel as, say, light crude. So it is the largest proven reserve, but it is, again, heavy crude and harder to access. So that is one pretty obvious reason. Another one, they support Cuba. As you can imagine, two socialist countries. Our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has a real issue with Cuba for obvious reasons. And any country that supports Cuba, Marco Rubio does not like. So that's a pretty obvious one there. Third one, China and Russia both support Venezuela and would like to invest in South America and sort of set up down there. And the United States, we do not want either one of those countries in the this part of the world, Northern and Southern America. We don't want them there getting a foothold and challenging our supremacy in this region of the world. So any country that works too closely with those two countries, China and Russia, is a target for us. And that's, again, a pretty obvious thing. Now, there are some dumber reasons why we are said to be targeting Venezuela, or reasons given to us by the mainstream press. One is that he is a socialist, Maduro, a socialist. Well, we deal with a lot of socialist countries. That is not really unique. So why that makes such a huge difference with him versus other people doesn't really make any sense. Again, that's a dumber reason why we're targeting him. Not just a socialist, but also a dictator. We don't deal with dictators. Yes, we do. We deal with dictators all the time. Again, we just endorsed a former Al-Qaeda leader in Syria. We have the Saudis, the Saudi royal family. So we will deal with strong men if they serve our purposes. So the fact that Maduro is a dictator is not really the reason why we are going after him. And the other reason, drugs. We are protecting our country from the scourge of drugs. So for some reason in 2025, After decades of not doing this, we have all of a sudden decided that we're going to start using our military to blow up all these alleged drug boats. Now, international law says drug smuggling is not something you handle with your military and military action, and that you should capture these boats and treat it as a law enforcement matter, and only shoot upon them if they are a imminent threat or if they have fired upon you. And these drug boats don't reach that criteria or meet that criteria. They're in international waters. Me personally, I would like us to use our Navy, capture these boats with everyone alive, and then show the drugs that they have and make your case that Venezuela is sending these boats to the United States. Just blowing them up and saying, take our word for it. Not a fan of that, especially since we know that during the Obama administration, we were drone striking the entire Middle East, and the overwhelming majority of the people we killed were innocent. So we have a long track record of blowing people up and then finding out later they weren't who we said they were. So I wish we did not do that. And besides, if we're claiming that we should use our military to go after these drug cartels that are an imminent threat to the United States, terrorists, well, the place where they actually do exist is a little place called Mexico. And why do I know they exist? Well, because we have millions of videos of these cartels filming themselves saying, we are this cartel. We're dressed in our military fatigues. We have our automatic weapons. And see those 5 people right there? We're about to behead them. So we know exactly who the cartels are, which ones are the most violent, most organized, and they are in Mexico, not in Venezuela. So if we're going to use our military to blow up these drug cartels because they are a imminent threat to the United States, I say start in Mexico, not in Venezuela. So you're pointing at one problem that's a little pinprick while ignoring the gushing wound, which is Mexico. So that, to me, is a really dumb stated reason. So those are a few of the stated reasons why we are going after Venezuela. Some of them fairly obvious, and some of the reasons given pretty stupid. Now, what do I think? Why are we targeting Venezuela right now? Well, the answer to me is pretty simple. Venezuela is just another on the list of countries that our foreign policy has been targeting for the last several decades. And it just so happens that right now it's Venezuela's turn. And we have decided that right now is the best time to try to knock over that government. That is it. We recently had the fall of Syria and the establishment of this new Al-Qaeda guy. We bombed Iran, so we were trying to go after that one. And right now in December of 2025, we have said, okay, now's the time for Venezuela. And the prelude to conflict is always a string of incidences and a flooding of the mainstream press with articles. So if you're paying attention, going back 6 months, you would see all these articles start showing up about Venezuela. And that is your clue that the foreign policy establishment has a new country in their crosshairs. And going back further, you can see this building up for years. Take Ukraine, for example, in the Ukraine war. It goes back decades. In 2014, our CIA helped to overthrow the government there, and that laid the groundwork for the conflict in 2022. So you can go back years. Same thing with Syria. We engaged in a long covert war against the Assad government using the CIA. So it collapsed recently, the government, the Assad government, But the effort started back in, I think, 2011 or 13, with the Obama, I think it was called Timber Sycamore program, run by the CIA, of getting guns to the anti-Assad forces. So all of these efforts to overthrow countries, they are years-long efforts. They build up over time, and if you're paying attention, you can see it coming. But oftentimes, the press isn't focused on it. There's all these things going on in the background that we're not paying attention to, and then at some point, it surfaces, and we see it, and we go, "Where the hell did that come from?" Well, it's been brewing for a very, very long time, and that is the same with Venezuela. Now, there's one more wrinkle I want to talk about with Venezuela that I find interesting, or at least I do. Other people, it bores the hell out of them, but I think it's important. And that is the financial situation and the legal issues with Venezuela. Because if you look at that, that can tell you a lot about how our country works, our financial system works, and how we try to get countries roped in to our system and under our thumb using money, using debt. So back in 2017, the Venezuelan government defaulted on their sovereign debt. And Maduro had said, Venezuela will not default on our debt. And in fact, they had been paying their debt, even though it was very, very expensive and people were starving. And people in the international community were saying, stop paying your debt. Focus on feeding people and default. But Maduro didn't want to default, because what happens when you default? Now you have to go to international bureaucracies and try to renegotiate your debt. And in that process, those international bureaucracies get inroads into your country and some level of control over your government. So that's why Maduro didn't want to default on the debt. But unfortunately, in November of 2017, that is what happened. And the United States placed sanctions on Venezuela that said, as long as Maduro is president of Venezuela, no U.S. companies, no U.S. banks, none of our institutions can help renegotiate the Venezuelan debt. So that is how we really increase the pressure on them, is we use these sanctions for these smaller countries. When we try them on bigger countries like Russia, not quite as effective. So in 2017, they default. But then in 2019, January, we recognized their interim president, Juan Guaido. Remember that guy? Did you ever wonder why this guy was being recognized by us? Well, it turns out there's a reason. Because we recognized Guaido as being the leader of Venezuela, we were allowed to negotiate with Guaido Venezuelan financial issues. And we also took our NGO money, USAID, and we were pouring it to Guaido and his allies. So there was a legal and financial reason why we recognized Guaido. So we negotiate with Guaido what to do with Venezuela. And we cut out Maduro. That's why we were doing it. Unfortunately for us, in 2023, the Venezuelan National Assembly was disbanded, and Guaido was no longer, quote unquote, the interim president, which kind of put us back to square one. Okay, we need somebody to recognize in Venezuela so we can start this negotiation process, but not Maduro. So what we did in October of 2023 is we agreed to lift some sanctions in exchange for an electoral agreement where certain conditions are satisfied for the upcoming election. So our goal was saying, okay, you do A, B, C, and D to ensure that this election is legitimate. We will lift some sanctions. And of course, We hope with this new electoral agreement that the person we want gets elected and not Maduro. But what happened? Maduro got elected, and of course we screamed foul and said, "Oh no, he didn't follow the agreement properly. This election was rigged." Of course, that's what we claim. So our plan of dropping some sanctions in exchange for some electoral stuff didn't work, and Maduro got elected again for another 6-year term. So at that point, the foreign policy establishment in the United States said, okay, that didn't work. 6 more years. Well, I guess now is the time. Let's take this guy out because our other plans all fell through. So this was coming for a very long time, going back years and years and years and years and years. And we tried other ways to get rid of this guy. And now that they've all failed, what is your last option, your last resort? You go to war. You chase him out the country with your military. And that is, I wouldn't say it's going to happen, but that is the threat right now. The issue is whether or not Trump will go through with it. And that is not clear to me. Right now, I think Trump is just trying to saber rattle, make threats with the hope that Maduro will make things easy for him and just leave the country. That is what Trump is hoping will happen, because I don't think he wants to use military force. He'd rather not. Look at his poll numbers. People aren't happy. Doing that would be a big problem for him. So he hopes that by making all these threats, blowing up these boats, that it will drive Maduro out the country. Unfortunately for Trump, I don't think it will work, and he'll be forced to make a decision whether or not to actually use military force. And we are only 11 months from the midterms. The way things are right now, the midterms do not look good for the Republicans. It looks really bad, actually. And a military action in Venezuela, I don't think will help at all. So Trump is in a very difficult position. The foreign policy establishment is pushing him toward attacking Venezuela and deposing Nicolas Maduro. But if he does that, bad for his poll numbers, bad for the midterms next year. But the foreign policy establishment, they don't care, because why? They own both sides of the aisle. Now, you might have Chuck Schumer saying, oh, we shouldn't go after Venezuela. That's performative. He's doing that for his voters. But he is part of the foreign policy establishment, and he's not really that much against Nicolas Maduro. So, interesting times. We will see what Trump does over the next several weeks, whether or not he actually attacks Venezuela or if he gets lucky and Maduro just walks away. But I am not counting on that. But we'll just have to see. Well, that is it for now. If you are new to my channel, like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.